Hi there, Carrie Varela here with the Reiki Women Podcast, and it's always so joyful to share these conversations with my colleagues and friends. So we have Bronwen Logan from Reiki with Bronwen and Michaela Daystar from Heartscapes Insight. And today we have a really interesting topic, one that is somewhat emotional, has a lot of depth and curiosity to it. And so we wanted to talk about, how do you know if the healing is working? Or another way of saying that, how do we know if the Reiki is working? And how do we get those cues, those intuitions, those inner knowings of how Reiki is helping us in our life? And a kind of the other side of this is also, how is it that, Reiki isn't working? What happens in those situations too, and why not that be? So Michaela, why don't you start? What do you want to share about your thoughts on whether or not the healing is working?
Yeah. This question is like one that I think threads through a practitioner's whole experience with Reiki. At least that's been true for me personally and from what I've observed with my colleagues. That, right from the start, when we first start practicing, this question often comes up. How do I know that it's working? Maybe I feel some sort of tingling sensation or some heat or something, and maybe I don't. Maybe the person we're working with feels something, maybe they don't. And there's often this anxiety that can come up about whether or not it is working. And we touched on this a little bit in our episode about confidence, in our conversation about confidence. That there can be a challenge with confidence and whether or not it's working when we begin. And then we move through our practitioner experience. We gain more confidence, we gain more experience. And there's such a wide range of moments that we have working with ourselves, with self-practice, working with others around this question of, is it working? For my part, I've had experiences where a client experiences what there's almost no other way to say it, but like a miraculous healing. Like they had a acute pain or something specific. One client I'm thinking of had a infection in her tooth, really inflamed, painful infection in her jaw and in her tooth. Couldn't get to the dentist for a couple of days. We did a group session, and it's like that infection just burned away, melted away. It felt like a miraculous healing. There's been other times when the specific thing that a client has come to get relief from does not experience any relief. It doesn't change, right? And so this question of, is it working, comes up. And then that question becomes even more poignant when we think about moments when somebody that we really, really, really wanted to help, maybe it's herself, maybe it's somebody else, perhaps they're experiencing a terminal experience or a really painful illness or injury, and Reiki is being shared and they're not experiencing relief from that illness, from that injury. And that question can then come from a really anguished place, a really angry place, a frustrated place, a really grieving place of, why does Reiki work sometimes for some people and it doesn't work for others other times? I've had that question posed to me recently by a student and client coming from a very pained place. And I want to just first say that it's a really understandable question. If that's something that's come up for any of you, if you've had an experience where you really wanted a healing experience for somebody that you loved and it did not seem to happen, their physical situation did not improve, that's a place to hold so much compassion for ourselves and for each other. It's a really painful question to ask. And it can be asked about Reiki, it can be asked about prayer, it can be asked about, any number of practices. And I don't have a good answer for it, right? I don't have the answer, I guess I should say. But what I do have is a desire for us to widen the conversation about what it means to be healed, about what healing actually looks like within the context of the system of Reiki. We often think about healing as, I have a pain, I have an illness, I have an injury, and that injury heals, that pain ends, that illness is cured. And within the system of Reiki, especially from its origins, healing doesn't necessarily mean the cure of some physical illness. It means, well, it means a state of mind that's described by the precepts. We can experience healing and wholeness even while our body is ill or broken or dying. All of us are going to die. Our bodies are in a process of moving towards the end of our body's time all the time. And so because that is true, what does healing mean? If our body is going to die inevitably, then what does healing actually mean? And I think that is where I would like to tenderly and compassionately adjust our question, right? What do we actually mean when we say healing in the context of Reiki? So I think that is the question I will pitch back to my two colleagues here.
Yeah, I think you're right. And, I was just thinking through the whole thing, we're all going to die, which is exactly what you were saying, Michaela. And, I mean, all of us, I'm 56 now, and, I can feel my body doing things that are strange to me that I never thought would happen to me. And, doesn't mean I'm going to die right now, but what I'm saying is I can feel the change in my body, and, no matter what, I am going to die at some point, so I always say that you can die whole, which is what you've just referred to. And so we need to really look at what that means, and, what does wholeness actually mean? I was doing a treatment yesterday, and I was just talking to a person about this subject, and, I was trying to explain that that their body, when we do a treatment, for example, that their body is always trying to find its way back into balance. And that's what we are always doing. Everything that we're doing is always trying to work its way back into some sense of balance. And sometimes that's not a straight road, and often it's not a straight road. So, we're going around things that are there that we can't seem to shift or move at the moment. And so as we try to find our way back into balance, it's going to be different for everybody what that is. And it's an ongoing thing. It's all our body seems to know what to do. And when I mean body, I'm not just talking about the physical body. I'm talking about ourselves mentally as well. And even just, if we break ourselves up always into the body, the mind, and the breath, these three aspects of us are integrated, and they're always working together to try to find their way to function the best that they possibly can. We, of course, can help that. And, lucky us being Reiki practitioners, because we have practices to do that with. So, there's lots of different practices out there in the world, Reiki being just one of them. But, it gives us the opportunity to work with ourselves physically, whether that be hands-on, but even I find the gift of meditation, of seating ourselves, learning to understand that how we seat ourselves in life is going to reflect upon our mental attitude and how we think and feel, and it allows, and when that works with us, then the breath seems to be able to move more freely and easily through us. And so we're always looking for ways. We can do it when we're sitting in meditation, but just that then moves into our day, and we start to understand that, if we are more upright, and, yoga, for example, would be, I guess, Carrie, similar in this sense, right? So if we're understanding our bodies more, then everything else is coming into alignment with that as well. So this is, what does it mean to be whole? And for me, it is working with those three aspects. So the body, the mind, the breath, allowing them to, giving them the opportunity to be the best that they possibly can be, because they're always trying to do that. But if we can bring our consciousness to that and allow them to really be their optimal selves, then we are going to be, our well-being will be optimal. And I think well-being is always a good word for us as well when we talk about healing. So we might be dying, but what is our sense of well-being in that space? Yeah. So I do think it does all come back to how we see our lives and how we experience that. And yeah, like I said, I think we're sort of blessed to be able to find ourselves living in a sense of wholeness if we can find the tools to work with that.
Yeah, I think it's a really important distinction to notice. I think a lot of times when I get this question of, well, what does healing look like? Or how will I know if the healing is working? A lot of times there's an underlying implicit like lack of inquiry or of ignorance inside of the questioner about death and the reality of death. So, to heal, I think we automatically, I mean, I can say myself, I automatically think of that as to like not die, right? Is to heal the source of the disease and live longer. And but that's not healing, really not healing. And healing is being, tied into the web of life, and to know that even when we die, that life itself is constantly and um, ever expandingly being reborn. And so we're part of that cycle, we're part of that loop, and to really be able to lean in and trust that and to know that. So when healing is not possible and a person or thing is going to die, it's inevitable. I believe Reiki is just an incredible comfort in those times, because we become and harmonize ourselves more fully with the fear of death, and working our way through that portal. It's the most challenging thing we'll ever go through, more than likely. Yet it actually could be very easy and very peaceful if we've done this inner work, and faced that fear of death in our life. But also Reiki, I think I love that you distinguish between the body, the breath, and the mind, because I think in each three of those different layers of who we are, there is a different kind of message or orientation towards healing. So I know for myself, the other day, it was the 4th of July. I think I had a couple really sugary margaritas or something. And I went to bed that night and I was like, oh, my back hurts. And I realized, actually, as I was kind of tuning in more deeply into my body, that it wasn't my back. I think my kidneys were just like kind of overloaded. And so I was like, oh my God, my kidneys, and my husband's a physician and he talks all day long about, kidney health and how important it is. And he just sees so many patients who have destroyed their kidneys one way or the other by our modern lifestyle and the diet we have and the things we can consume. Anyway, so I was like, oh gosh, I'll just I was going to bed and I gave my kidneys some Reiki. And I love giving kidneys Reiki, and they just seem, in my point of view, to really respond to the energy. And if you're familiar with traditional Chinese medicine, the kidneys are an incredibly important energetic organ. And as I gave myself Reiki, that tension started to dissipate, and I felt that there was some detoxification happening, or something that was assisting my body. Maybe that's just my own awareness. It could be just the way I'm thinking, but I felt so much better, and my body felt better and lighter, and I wasn't feeling the same back pain. And so, and similarly, I've been having this weird throat thing. And so I've been giving myself Reiki in my throat, and I feel that it's improving and helping it. And So those are little things, right? Little things that can happen. And as Reiki's been in my life for such a long time now, it feels like I get grown accustomed to it. But I think when I first discovered Reiki, all of this was such a revelation for me, and I was just kind of astounded by the ability to be like, okay, like I can just place my hands and focus my breath and awareness of sending healing energy into a certain area of my body, and get this incredible benefit, of feeling like that pain or that tension dissipating. um and then I've been thinking also, as you were talking about body, breath, and mind, a lot of the things that tend to cause us disruption or to make us not feel well is a mental thing, mental and emotional. Maybe we can tie those two together. And so I've seen amazing things with both myself and my clients and my students who've studied Reiki about the benefits of how much Reiki has improved their well-being. And that's really, I feel like, where Reiki is so strong, is so powerful and potent to help us, is in that like kind of liminal space, mental, emotional space. But in those cases, like it's like, okay, let's say if you had anxiety or something, and Reiki came into your life, maybe it dramatically improves your anxiety for a period of time. But like you were saying, Michaela, it's not like you're never going to experience anxiety ever again. So it's a tool to help us move through those strong emotions, those strong feelings when they arise. It's almost like if you were, sailing on the ocean and you were expecting smooth sailing for the rest of your life. It's just not realistic, right? Like there's going to be storms, there's going to be big waves. So Reiki is a tool to help center ourselves in the midst of, life's chaos, and to, even access what it is that's causing us this kind of disturbance, this emotional upwelling. And in those cases, I've also found that I feel like Reiki, and because it is so linked to consciousness, it's also this riding those waves of inner knowing, that to trust the process, and that we will come out better and stronger on the other side, that there is something that's happening within inside that storm, is something, a lesson that we need to learn, something that needs to be healed in order for us to take that next step in our life, to feel strong and confident in that next step. And so I think that's one thing that we can lean into, to trust that the healing is working, is to trust the process, and to know, even when we're going through it, that on the other side there is maybe a bigger picture, a bigger perspective that we gain from going through that. And if nothing else, it's compassion, right? Compassion for ourselves and for others, because even if our life is just a flat ocean, like other people have issues too. So we have to be able to, put one foot into their storm as well, to be on their level, to know how intense and deep and painful some traumas are. And if we don't know that and experience that ourselves, why would we even care when anybody else is suffering? We wouldn't care, because we wouldn't have the emotional capacity to really be with them in that storm if we hadn't been there ourselves.
Yeah, that's really poignant. I appreciate you bringing in that perspective of empathy, and of the conditions under which compassion can be extended to each other. And it's so often the case that there's such serendipity between the topics that arise in this circle and things that are happening in other areas of my life. I think I'd shared before that I'm at the end of teaching a 9-week class with the Book of Joy. And that book walks you through the 8 obstacles to accessing our deep joy, which I really associate with remembering the wholeness of our true self, the outcome of practicing the system of Reiki, and then the 8 pillars to joy. And so we concluded last week examining the 8th obstacle and the 8th pillar. And the 8th obstacle, meaning the most challenging, is discussed as the fear of death and illness, and the ways in which that fear, not death itself, not illness itself, but the fear of it, is our, among our greatest obstacles to experiencing joy. And the mindset shifts that are necessary for us to be with the reality of illness and death, the inevitability of it, and the seemingly arbitrary nature sometimes of whether or not a person will suffer more than others, because there are certainly people who experience far more than what we might say is their fair share of illness, of pain, of injury, of suffering, in their life, and others who, experience relatively little. And there's an arbitrariness to that is just, an alchemy of the circumstances of our life, the choices we make, etc. And in discussing this mindset, the necessary mindset for living free from the fear of illness or death, there's a really powerful quote that I wanted to share with you all. This was shared by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and he's discussing the perspective of one of his doctors. Now, while they were making the Book of Joy, the Archbishop was actively receiving treatment for prostate cancer, and ultimately he died from prostate cancer, I believe 2 Christmases ago. And so, as he's having this discussion, he's actively walking towards the end of his life, and he's very conscious of it. And that was part of the conversation that they had. And so, speaking of one of his doctors, he shared this. He made the powerful distinction between healing and curing. Curing involves the resolution of the illness, but was not always possible. Healing, he said, was coming to wholeness and could happen whether or not the illness was curable. And it was like, yeah, exactly. That's what Reiki is here to teach us. And then we circle back to the question, well, how do we know then that the healing is happening, that the wholeness is happening? Well, we're given a roadmap to that, right? With the precepts. Upon working with Reiki for ourselves or on behalf of another person or receiving from another person, are we less afraid? Are we less attached to our anger about the illness that we're experiencing? Are we less attached to fear of the ultimate outcome of that illness? Are we more grateful for our life as it is, for the presence of the wholeness of our life in this exact moment? Are we being true to ourselves as we're walking through this obstacle of illness? And ultimately, are we compassionate with ourselves and with other people? And are we able to maintain those mindsets even in the midst of illness, pain, impending death, or the death of loved ones? And what I would say is that truly that is the benchmark that we can hold when we're asking ourselves the question, is the healing working? Are we experiencing those shifts in our mental and emotional experience? And then we can observe, as is often the case, that when we are able to achieve shifts in our mindset as described by the precepts, we can potentially experience some relief around the illness. And we've talked about that before. This is something that's been studied from a medical perspective, the relationship between stress and fear and anxiety and the tension that creates in our body, the fight or flight cycle that our body runs through when we're living with stress, tension, anxiety, fear, the connection between that and physical pain and illness. Whether or not the body is being given enough rest in order to go through its process of balancing, of releasing enough tension for there to be cessation of pain, or at least reduction in pain. And when we think about the physical relief that a person might experience when receiving Reiki or performing it on themselves, I would invite us to hold the framework and hold the idea that physical relief is a result of the mental and emotional relief. It is a result of the reduction in fear. It's a result in the increase in compassion for whatever it is that we're experiencing, compassion for all the other people in our life that are experiencing it with us. It is a result of tapping into greater gratitude, and that those are the immediate gifts of the system of Reiki, and reduction in physical pain, reduction in illness, even miraculous healing of the body is a result of those shifts in our mental and emotional experiences. And that, again, we should look first to what is the state of our mind and our emotions before we look to what is the state of our body in the midst of illness.
A good example of that is something I just heard a couple of days ago. They were talking about pain somewhere, and how we all experience pain differently. It's very hard to know, if your pain is the same as my pain. We might have the same problem, but we're going to have different feelings of pain. And they said, for example, a violinist whose fingers are so important to them because that is what they do, right? If they have a problem with their fingers, if they hurt their fingers in some way, their level of pain is so much more. If they had to give a level of pain, it's so much more than the level of pain of someone like myself who is not a violinist, right? So we can see then that is directly connected with the state of mind. So we have this physical thing happening, but how are we experiencing it? Why are we? And, you named some of the reasons there. It could be anything, couldn't it, Michaela? I mean, it could be because of fear or anxiety. That could actually be also part of that. Or maybe it's just that they have more of a physical awareness of their fingers, or whatever it is. I don't know, and I'm certainly never ever going to diagnose those things. So my interest is obviously that, yes, it is the state of mind that does create this world that we live in. I mean, if I'm in pain myself and yet I go and do something where I'm having a really good time, I forget that I've got pain for that time. Yeah. And then when that time's over, I'm like, oh yeah. So, we can see that, yes, there is pain or problems or whatever, but it still is dictated by the mind. So with, this integration of ourselves and understanding that that there's always that we can work on ourselves in different ways. When we talk about Carrie said something like if healing's not possible. For me, healing is always possible. And I think actually maybe that's what Desmond Tutu was saying. I've forgotten what he said now, but healing is always happening, is my understanding, right? The body, it's just our consciousness is not there with it. But healing is always happening. And because our body is always, it's moving, shifting, changing. Nothing stays the same. It's always trying to work with what we've got and what is happening. So yes, bringing in the precepts helps us to bring our state of mind to that situation, and therefore we can bring relief. But also we don't want to, I was feeling a lot of guilt and shame myself when I'm thinking about, fear of death. I have fear of death. And I think, everybody, well, not everybody, I don't know. Most people have that, I guess. And, I think if I were to die right now, I would find that incredibly difficult and challenging, and for all that I would hope for myself that wouldn't be the case. But I think our expectations of ourselves need to be here now is more the point, rather than of somewhere like thinking, oh yeah, next time when I do Reiki on blah blah blah, then this is going to happen. Well, I don't know. I can't say that. I can never say that. All I can say is that right here, right now, this is how things are, and bring in the state of mind that is best going to support me in this moment. I cannot think that every time if I put my hands on a certain part of my body that something's going to happen, or on someone else's body, or if I'm meditating, I don't know, everything, it's different every time. All I know that is if I put my state of mind in line with the precepts and in that moment, then I am giving myself the best potential that I can right now. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it, as you said, I don't believe that healing is always possible. Absolutely, and I think just for clarity's sake, I think sometimes our words are so important, right? And so I guess what I was saying there is just that maybe cessation of death is not possible. Somebody has a disease process that's going to death, and that nothing is going to stop that, right? And that can happen, and but yet like healing is so profound. And if you're dealing with a life-threatening illness, or you're have a terminal illness, I think Reiki can be such a support. Through my practice, I've had a chance to work with mostly women who are like death doulas, who just can hold the space for somebody in that real intense time of their life, and that's their gift. And I'm always just so uh, inspired by people who can do that, because I can't imagine how challenging that must be emotionally, to sit with people who are about ready to die. But I'm assuming that inside that, if somebody had that gift, that they have a profound realization or a profound awareness of the process of death and dying, and the beauty of it, right?
There's a
And
beauty. Yeah.
there's
Mm.
a lot of beauty, right? And actually, Franz just posted a post today about the distinction between experience and realization. And I feel like that's also a really good way of clarifying, because I think sometimes on our Reiki journey, and I can say this for myself, like when I first started Reiki, I was all like, crown chakra exploding, and like I had like so many profound experiences. And palpable experiences, and that kind of made me chase after another mystical experience. Oh, I had this vision. I do tend to, in a really deep state of meditation, I'll see a lion, and that's always just a sign to me of just this sacred, beautiful love. And so those things are happening to me. I seek them out, of course, and I think it's really beautiful when they arrive. But we can get stuck chasing those experiences, right? And then we're just kind of on this hamster wheel of wanting more, wanting more. It's almost like using Reiki as a drug. Um, but then he distinguished between that and realization. And I guess that's where like my more mature practice is trying to lead me towards, is kind of moving away from these profound experiences into a different way of being and thinking about my life. And what I've been realizing lately is that when I'm always chasing some goal, some goal that feels just out of my reach, that can cause me a lot of misery and suffering. And if I am in touch with the precepts, I'm more grounded in today, and I'm more grateful for the times where I've chased a goal and I got it, and then it's here, and I can be with that, and I can just savor being with that goal and having achieved it, um, having that thing in my life that meant so much to me, without being like, oh, this thing that was like last year. Now I'm on to this thing, this new thing, and I think we can be very prone to doing that in a more immature state. I can say I can be more prone to doing that. That we can just keep chasing experiences without really sitting with the blessings that we have in our lives, the things that really, really matter the most, and taking time every day to remember that, to be mindful of it. It's such an important part of Reiki, and obviously something that the precepts are guiding us into, that awareness of the day and the gratitude that we have in each day.
Yeah. Just on that, just about profound, like a practice can be profound, but if the practice is profound, it teaches us that life is profound, right? So because life is our practice. So, it is all interconnected. And if only sitting is going to be profound, that's not enough. You know, it's actually, we've got to find that, or we don't have to find it. That's what comes out of that, hopefully, that that everything that we do, every moment has this awareness that there is a profoundness to it.
You know, both of you are bringing something up for me that I want to touch on, as you're talking about awareness and the importance of our awareness of the profoundness of life, of each experience that we're having, of, what exactly is healing in any moment. And that's that oftentimes when I've seen this question posed in community spaces, in various groups that I've been a part of, and there is this desire, I think, for a lot of people to broaden the scope of what we mean when we say, is Reiki working? And so oftentimes the answer that comes back is, kind of what you were speaking of, Carrie, to trust the process, that Reiki knows where to go. It's going to do its job. We don't always feel something specific, but we can trust that Reiki is working where it needs to work. And so if you haven't, you're not feeling anything, you're not experiencing anything, don't worry about it. Just keep sharing Reiki and, trust that Reiki is doing what it's wanting to do. And I agree to a certain extent that we can trust this process. But what I want to invite us into and maybe caution us around is that there's a certain dismissiveness to that answer of just don't worry about it if you're not feeling anything, just trust that Reiki is doing what it's doing. Because I think that dismisses this awareness piece that you're speaking to. And even if we're not feeling something, right? We're not feeling heat or tingling. We're not feeling a change in the discomfort of whatever it is that we're experiencing. Our emotional state, is the same. That yes, we should trust our process. We should trust our practice, and we should continue being with it, even if there isn't anything like mind-blowing happening in that moment. But let's not lose track of the awareness piece. And let's make it part of our practice that we offer ourselves an assessment. Let's check the state of our mind, the state of our emotions. Let's, compare how we were feeling before against the precepts, right? And if we again use the precepts as our measuring stick, as our guidepost for whether or not Reiki is working, then I think oftentimes, again, what people mean when they say I don't feel it working is they don't feel something physical happening, right? And so let's take it a step further and let's do a little bit of assessment around our mental and emotional state. Right? I wasn't practicing Reiki earlier. Now I'm practicing Reiki. Do I feel less attached to fear? Do I feel more calm, more grounded? Do I feel more spacious? Do I feel more grateful, compassionate, etc.? Let's actively engage our awareness around what is actually occurring for us. Not because, Reiki requires that necessarily, but because that's part of the relationship that we have with our practice, with with this as a system, right? Independent of the idea of Reiki as a phenomenon in the world. When we talk about practicing Reiki, it's a system of practice. And so part of our relationship with that practice and the way in which that practice increases the profoundness of our life, or our awareness of the profoundness of life, right? Because there's life is profound. There's miracles happening within us and around us all the time. The miraculous is so common that it goes out of our awareness, right? But when we really pause, and this is one of the things that practicing Reiki has really, really done for me, is that it gives me that moment of pause to become aware of the miraculous that's happening all around me. And so if I just say, well, I'm not feeling anything happening, but I'm just going to go ahead and trust that Reiki is doing its thing and move on with my life, I'm missing that opportunity to pause and to become aware of the profoundness of my life, the miracles that are happening right in front of my eyes, inside of me, around me, in the natural world, in my relationships all the time. And so I think, I just want to emphasize that piece that you were speaking to about awareness, and that cultivating awareness is part of the practice. And so we shouldn't just dismiss, whether or not something is working without taking that pause. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, I like that. And just a thing, we talked about well-being, right? And I think that's, it's understanding our well-being, isn't it? And what that actually means. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, I think for me, when I'm saying trust the process, it's more about not fighting the feelings, right? It's like, okay, I'm feeling anxious right now, and in that anxiety, I'm kind of spiraling out of control because I don't have a container to really look at it. And that, like, the as the feeling gets bigger and bigger, I'm more and more panicking because I don't know how to process that feeling or emotion. Rather, it's about, the trusting of the processes. I have this practice. I can sit inside these feelings. I can start to pick them apart. I can start to recognize where they're coming from, and then I can tend to that part of myself that isn't feeling safe, or is worried, or doesn't feel good about the present moment, or there's an anxiety there for them. um, and then in that process, they can trust that they can unravel the roots of whatever it is that's going on inside of them. So just that clarity piece. But I think you're right.
Yeah,
Like,
no, and I think
you know
you were speaking to the like effective and comprehensive version of trusting the process. And I was wanting to like highlight the like dismissive side of that, because I think what you're speaking to is really what we're striving for and what we should be holding as our benchmark for practice. And I appreciated that.
Yeah, and I think it's important, that trusting the process can be kind of bypassing, right? If we're just like, oh, let's just Reiki the thing, and then I just get to close the door on that feeling, because it's probably going to come back a little bit bigger next time if we're not really sitting with it and giving ourselves that bigger container to be with it. And in that way, we really begin to create more realization. And then if there is, like, for me, I'm realizing that, like, fear of failure is one of those big things that, like, when I feel like, oh, I'm going to fail at this, then I can go through a whole roller coaster emotionally around that feeling. And and it really comes down to how emotionally aware I am to not kind of bite the bullet, to not, take the bait emotionally. And so I think that that's also important, to be able to be like, okay, I can feel this way, but it doesn't mean anything about who I am as a person, what I'm capable of, etc. And I guess one other thing I would like to share about this is I think that sometimes when we do have a disease, or we do have a mental emotional illness like anxiety, or maybe even something that's more pronounced, that, like, it can become part of our identity too. And I think that that's also what, trusting the healing, or how do I know the healing is happening? Sometimes when we start to not identify ourselves so much with illness, and rather start to identify ourselves as ourself, right? And a lot of times, they say that, authors have put it out there, reason why somebody doesn't heal if they go through rounds of counseling and tons of Reiki sessions, and yet they come out the same on the other side, because they really identify with, whatever it is that they're really seeking to heal. They're not really willing to loosen around that identity. And so that can be a really profound aspect of healing, as well as to let go of that, kind of in that soulful space where we begin to really disconnect from that illness and more connect to our true self.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful place for us to land in this conversation. So yeah, it's a poignant one, and I'm glad that we got to take that walk today.
Yeah. Anything else anyone wants to add before we head out?
I'd love to just foreshadow that our 100th episode of this podcast is coming up in about a month. I think we've got 4 more episodes until we get there. And we're thinking about doing something kind of fun for that 100th episode, and where we will be kind of floating that idea, getting input, and ultimately probably enacting that fun thing will be in our Facebook group, which is called Embodying Reiki with the Reiki Women Podcast. And so if you are not in that group, we invite you to join us there. We continue the conversation from the podcast in that space. We make announcements in that space and offer other resources and goodies there as well. And we'll be sharing whatever it is that we land on for our 100th episode in that space. And so we'll put links down below for you to join us in that space if you would like to.
Yeah, and make sure, if you like or are interested in what we talk about, do share it with others, and, share the YouTube link. And, I think it's valuable to create. I think that's what we're doing, is creating conversations, and I think we appreciate it. If that conversation gets out there and helps other people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, friends. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. Feel free to like, share, comment, all the things. And we look forward to continuing on a new topic next week. Till then, be well. See ya.
Bye.
Love you. Bye.